Okay, Tony, so I couldn't find any really good videos or anything for you to take a look at, so I'm just going to do one with one of your parts here. Make it a little bit more personal for this job. So I'm running Mastercam 2017 this morning, so don't worry about how different Mastercam looks. The process, though, is going to be completely the same. So the first thing that I want to do when I bring this part in is make sure that it's oriented, you know, in the lathe plane, so the D facing vertical and the Z facing lengthwise. So I'm going to open up my plane manager. Oops. First, before that, I have to pick my machine. So I'm just going to grab a generic lathe here. That's where you would pick your Haas. So you can see right now my plane doesn't make any sense. I want the Z to run lengthwise down the side of the part. So I'm just going to toggle through these to see if any one of these planes makes any sense. So it doesn't seem so. So that's fine. That's not the end of the world. I mean, we could do one of two things from this point. We could either, you know, stick with this plane and orient the part so that the Z-axis lines up, so basically just physically rotate this part in space, or we can create a new plane. So I'm just going to say create from, and I'll just say this back face here. So actually I got kind of lucky here. It's sent my Z-axis, my diameter axis. I'm just going to reverse that and call this turning plane. Okay, then I'm just going to set that equal, so that's my WCS and my tool plane. So throughout this whole project, we want this to stay our WCS, because that's basically your machine, your parts orientation inside of your machine. What the T is for is the tool plane. That's going to be the axis that your cutting tool comes from. So the next thing we're going to do is, you know, we'll program all of our lathe tool paths just like normal. And for example, let's say now we want to cut with an end mill lengthwise down this face and just have a tool path run around like a simple milling contour tool path. So this being a lathe plane doesn't make any sense for a milling tool path. So I'm going to come into my plane manager, uncheck this lathe planes option, and see if one of these has a tool path, or sorry, an axis with the Z-axis facing lengthwise again, because we want our tool to come from this end of the part. Depending on where we want our tool to come from, we'll set our Z-axis based on that. So my first attempt here, Mastercam top, you can see the Z-axis comes from the end of the part. So that's saying we're going to have an end mill, you know, longitudinally on this part. So I'm going to set that as my tool plane. And I'm going to come up to my 2D tool paths. Now this is just a milling tool path I'm doing in lathe. Contour. Now this looks a little bit different, but the icons are pretty close. So what I'm going to do is basically chain some of this geometry. So that's my chain, or that's my selection. I verify my, actually before I go anywhere, I want to double check that Mastercam top is still my selection here for tool plane, which it looks good. Chain. So this looks good for a milling tool path. I want the cutter to climb cut around the part. And I think I have a metric file open here, so I'm gonna grab a bullnose cutter. Depending on, you know, the floor radius of this part, you know, you could have a bullnose cutter that cleans the part right to finish. I'll go with a big 20mm. Just obviously this may not be what you use. So feeds and speeds, you can set all that up there. You know, define your holder. Everything here, I'm pretty much just going to leave default. Not sure how familiar you are with the milling controls, but most of it's pretty self-explanatory. If you start, clicking around, you'll see what you're gonna get. So depth cuts, in case I don't want to cut the full depth of that part. So say if I cut in like 15 millimeter increments, or it's a 20 mil cutter, so it's only 25. Lead in and out. So I'm just gonna take this and extend my contour. Obviously this is a lead in with an arc. What I'm gonna do down here is actually extend the toolpath by 150% of the cutter diameter. So that's basically gonna take the cutter and shoot it straight off the end of the part. Breakthrough, I'm not too interested in. Multi-passes, if I want to do a 2 cuts, space 2 millimeters out, so I'm going to take 1 cut and then leave 2 millimeters and come back again and finish it. So depth. Now one thing to be aware of before you start looking at your depths and your numbers here is I'm going to check my planes. So WCS is still turning plane, and it's always going to be that. Tool plane is Mastercam top, so the cutter is coming from the end of the tool. So my depth is going to be somewhere here, so on this face. Top of stock, I don't think I have a point out here, so I'm just going to grab the closest thing I can. Close enough. So top of stock is 73, I'll just call it 80, I don't know. Feed plane, I'll pull the feed rates, so it's going to rapid to a point that's 90 millimeters from my finished face. And I'll have it retract to 90 as well. So everything else looks pretty good. These are all some more, specialty things depending on what you want to do. So it looks like my lead in, lead out might be a little bit overkill. Oops. But either way, now you kind of get the idea. Oops, turn rapids on. And so this is just going to do steps down the part until it reaches that finished face. And so here's your finished cut. So actually, it looks like I got pretty lucky with my bullnose radius. So I guess, yeah, before I go on, I'm just going to shorten up my lead-ins to 75%. Kind of tighten that up a little bit. And then, let's say I want to come from, from the screen view here. I want to take a cutter and run a slot here. Same deal as before. I'm going to go into my plane manager and look for a plane that the z-axis is facing towards me. So that one looks good. Or that one. So z-axis is facing away or towards me. So that's Mastercam front. So now Mastercam front is our T-plane. So our tool is coming from Mastercam front. And again, I'm going to run a contour. I mean, you can run any of these these 3-axis milling tool paths, but just for the sake of keeping it simple, I'm going to run a contour. Let's just say I'm going to do it on all this stuff here. Mastercam front. I want to double check that plane all the time. Chain direction looks good, the side looks good. Let's grab a tool. Not sure how big this is, but I'm going a 5mm cutter. Again, define your holder. Same deal as before, basically. Depth cuts. Actually, I'm going to change this one. The contour toolpath has a lot of options, so I'm going to do a ramp toolpath. So I'm going to start ramping at the top of the material and ramp all the way through. So let's say I have a 3-degree ramp angle. So depth cuts I don't need. Lead in, lead out. I'm not going to extend the contour, but let's just say, for example, I'll do one of these little curly Q type lead-ins. Make it a little bit smaller though, so it stays inside. So say I want to break through by, I don't know, 2 millimeters. Don't need multi-passes because we're doing a ramp. Although if you wanted to, you could do a multi-pass to make a finished cut. top of stock. Actually, let me go back. So one more double check. Mastercam front. So again, top of stock is going to be right there. Depth down there. So plus 10, minus 10, that makes sense. I'll make my feed plane be a little bit above. Retract to 30, something like that. Okay, so now if I look at only this operation, you'll see that. So first of all, you can see here, this is my lead out. My lead in and lead out is still a little bit too big. This cutter is pretty close to the slot size, so I'm just going to cancel that lead in, lead out stuff because I don't really need it for a ramp anyway. And now we have a cutter that's going to come from the Mastercam top angle and work its way down. And so you can basically machine every single one of your parts using that strategy. The only one that's a little bit different is the handle, where the toolpath you're going to want to run is an undercutting toolpath. So basically the same process. You're going to set up your lathe plane first, and then you're going to set up a mill plane relative to that so that your Z-axis faces just like we had here, so your cutter is coming from the end of the part. And then you're just going to select an undercutting toolpath that can take that slot cutter basically over the outside of the handle and back down in.